This is the Kentucky Comprehensive Literacy Grants question and answer session about the RFA. So the agenda today is just to answer questions. And I do want you to know that we will be compiling all of the questions that people ask, and we will be putting them together in a document that will be released and posted up on the KDE Competitive Grants website, so that all the questions that are asked today, all the questions that are asked tomorrow, and all the questions that have been sent into the KDE RFP mailbox will also be listed so that you can get information about the grant. So we're going to get started, and if anyone would like to unmute, you're welcome to just unmute and answer questions. The other thing you can do is put questions in the chat box. So we'll go ahead and get started, and we'll be glad to answer any questions that you have.
Dana, can you hear us?
I can, yes.
Hello, it's Katie. Yes.
Hi, Katie.
How are you?
I'm doing great, thank you.
Okay, we're going to jump right in. So,
okay.
We have several questions, and so here we go.
Okay.
Do we have to blind copy the EE forms?
Yes. Oh, no, I'm sorry. No, you do not have to blind copy the EE forms. That's a good question. It's a very good question. And no, you do not. You're just going to send those to the mailbox, the KDE RFP mailbox, and we will get back with you and let you know whether what you're requesting is approved or not. But no, you do not need to blind copy those. Thank you for asking that.
Yeah, we felt like that was the answer, but we just wanted to be sure. Okay, this next one's a little more complicated.
Okay.
So we have a vendor that we would like to submit on the EE form, and I'll just go ahead and say it. It's for the Early Childhood Literacy Academy through GREC.
Okay.
So there are 3 separate EE forms that GREC has helped us fill out and facilitate. Okay. And so one is for dialogic reading, one is for phonological awareness with letter awareness or recognition. I can't remember the specific terminology. And then one is for the professional learning network that goes all under the one Early Childhood Literacy Academy. Okay. Do we need to fill out the questions on the EE form for each one of those, or only one time for the whole academy?
So let me do some clarification. So the things that you talked about, you said phonological awareness and the dialogic reading, are those going to be taught within the academy?
Yes.
Okay. So then your elevating evidence packet can focus on, well, first of all, there's not going to be evidence, there's not going to be research on GREC specifically. Right. So, and that happens with, you know, most of the professional learning providers. So you don't look up the professional learning provider. What you look up is the strategy. So your research would focus on dialogic reading, training on phonological awareness, or I don't think you said phonemic awareness, but I bet you that's included in there as well. But so that's what your research would be based on. But if you want to turn them all in together, the questions that you answer could be about the academy as a whole. So it kind of depends on the way you want to do it. So every elevating evidence packet does have to have those questions that go with it. So if you want to turn in a separate elevating evidence for each of one of the strategies that are going to be taught, then if you did it all separately, then you would really need to answer questions separately as well, because every one of them needs to have that attached. However, if you kind of want to put all that together and talk about the different components of what you would be learning through GREC, and then talk about what the research says on dialogic reading, what it says on phonological awareness, you can do that within one. So either way is fine. The main thing is that you're looking for research about the specific strategies and how they specifically will impact the students that you're serving. And sometimes it's the teachers, how they'll impact the teachers as well. And then those questions you'll answer kind of tie all of that research into specifically what the grant is looking for. Does that answer? Do you have any other questions about that, Katie?
No, I think that gets at what we were thinking. And likely the 3 strategies that fall under that academy will submit together under that one
Okay.
Form. Okay, thank you. And then the other two are kind of just operational. Will the session tomorrow be different than today's Q&A session?
Well, it'll be different because people will ask different questions.
Okay.
But these are just both open forums to ask questions. That's it. And we are capturing the questions and the answers that will be on a document that are uploaded to the KDE site. So it's just an open format. So it is not different, but it is because people might ask different questions.
Yeah. Sure. And then my last one, and then everybody else can have it. Sorry to kind of monopolize it. The videos, if we can't make a session, if we have a competing engagement, will the videos be posted for the other, maybe not the Q&A since you're capturing those, I get that, but like maybe even the informational session or the technical assistance, will those be captured and put on the website? Okay.
Yeah, we've been capturing everything on video, and we're going to capture this as well, and it'll be posted as well. So we've been posting all the recording. So the recording, all of the technical assistance we've done up to this point, there is already a recording that's on the KDE, competitive grants website. It's already there, and this will be, and the other two that we have. So we have today's question and answer, tomorrow's question and answer. And then make sure I give you the right dates, 18th and 19th. Is that what it is, Danielle? The 18th and the 19th is the technical assistance for writing the grant. So the way that's going to be different is we're going to go through the RFA, specifically looking at all of the components that are graded at the end, like the way it's scored, and just talk to you about what you need to have in each one of the components in order to get the highest score possible. And so that's what we're going to talk about on the 18th and 19th of November. And yes, they will be recorded.
Wonderful. Thank you.
You're welcome. Sometimes it takes us a few days to get that. Sometimes the turnaround for getting those recordings posted is short. Sometimes it takes a few days, but they absolutely will be there. And speaking of the RFA, if you haven't looked at the RFA lately, you might want to take a look at it. Every now and then things are pointed out that need to be clarified, and we want to always have the most clear RFA as possible. So we have gone in and made a few corrections. They're not really changes. It's just clarifications. And so if you haven't gone to the KDE RFP website and pulled up the RFA lately, I suggest you do that. Because what we did was we made a few clarifications, and you'll know that because it's in a dark red that's on the latest copy. So you might want to just check back on the RFA from time to time, because like I said, if someone asks a question and we think something needs to be clarified, although it doesn't change the body of any, it doesn't really change the body of what we're asking and what will be has to be turned in and what will be scored. It's just clarifications. And so, but I would suggest you go back from time to time and look to see if there's any updates, because we have updated it at this time. Anybody else have any questions?
Hi, Dana. This is Luann Williams and Julie Hayes.
Hey, how are you guys?
Good. How are you?
Doing great.
Okay, so we have a couple of questions.
Okay.
The naming of our partners.
Yes.
So how do we need to handle that? Because our we have a couple of daycare facilities, public library, that if we put the name would give away the where.
Well, so I will tell you that if you're talking, I know what you're talking about, blind copying. Like, how can you blind copy those? So then you would just take away the name of the library. You don't have to worry that, like, obviously, if you're in a district and you've only got one library, somebody could figure it out. But if you just put library, so if you just blind copy the name, because obviously if it's a library, we need to know your partner's a library, your partner is a certain daycare, but you just need to take the names out. What KD requires for fairness of scoring the RFAs is that nothing in there would tell a score where you're from. And so you just, all you have to do is just take that out. So even the letters, like if you can mask the name of the community partner or the name of the because you're going to have letters for your community partners, and that would be things like your library or your health department or whoever you decided to partner with, and for whatever reason. Then you would also want to do that for your early care providers. So you do have to blind copy that. You could always mask it. To ask me more. Would you, what do clarification can I give you? Is that clear or?
So their letters do not have to be a blind, just whatever, however we reference them in our narrative.
No, their letters do need to be blind as well. So you do every single thing you turn in for that second blind copy has got to be blind, because the reviewers do read those and it has to be blind as well. So you could mask. So if it said the name of a preschool, you would mask the name, but obviously we need to know that that letter is from a preschool. So you may even need to do something like, for example, I'm going to make up something. So let's say you're going to partner with Little Lambs and they send you a letter and it's from Little Lambs, but they don't really tell you within the body it's a preschool. What you might need to do is mask or delete, if you can, Little Lambs and put preschool, or you know what I mean, or early childhood provider or whatever. So, but yeah, they do have to be blind, but we do have to know what it is. So if it's a preschool somewhere in there, and we need to know it's a preschool, or if it's a community partner, we need to know it's a community partner. But the actual names have to be blind. Everything has to, that second copy, every single thing has to be blind. So yeah, and so really look at that, when I know, when you've worked on a document for a long time and you look at it, your eyes just kind of skate over it and sometimes don't really see every word. So I highly suggest that you get somebody, a partner who looks for things with you to make sure that it's blind copied, because this is a requirement. Like, it absolutely has to be blind copied regardless of what you've turned in the past. That second copy has to be blind all the way through.
Okay. What about the data for the partners? Is it okay in some of those charts, if it's a library, for instance, they're not going to have proficiency data? Is that okay, or are you guys looking for something specific?
No, that's perfectly fine.
Okay.
When we're talking about the partners, that if are you talking about what's in their letter? Is that what you're or your narrative talking about them? What do you, or both?
Oh, Dana, sorry, that was all choppy. I couldn't hear your word.
Oh, okay. So so let me just clarify. Are you talking about in the partner letters and in the community partner and early child care partner letters? Is that what you're talking about? Or are you talking about within your 25-page narrative about them? Or both?
Within the 25-page narrative.
Yeah, so you probably aren't gonna have data on your community partners, and probably not your preschool partners either. And that's perfectly fine. Basically, what we're looking for in the grant is their commitment and their plan for working with you. So for example, in preschool and early child care, they have to commit to being a part of the cohorts. And some of them are gonna need to be in cohort 1, which means they're going to need to get the number of hours that is required, professional learning hours that's required for cohort 1. So they're in the letter, it needs to say that they want to learn and grow and be more effective at creating literacy environments and literacy learning for their kiddos to be ready for school. And they are committed to and excited about attending the professional learning that's going to be, that they're going to have the opportunity to do if through this grant. And so, but you don't have to have data on them. When you're talking about in your narrative, when you're talking, I mean, one of the things in the letter and the narrative, if you've worked with them in the past, They could
Mhm.
talk about what they've done in the past, like how have they supported your district, or how have they supported literacy apart from you and now you want to work together. But if it's never happened in the past, then they can say, we know that it's important to focus on literacy and to partner together with the school district, and we want to, we want to collaborate and partner. And so that's the kind of thing you'll talk about, but it doesn't have to have it. You're probably not going to have data on that, and that's okay.
Okay, great. Okay, one more question and I'm done, I think.
Okay.
What about the budget? Does it need to encompass all 3 years, or do you want just the first year?
It needs to focus. The main part needs to focus on year one. That's really what you need to do when in that budget and narrative, that is an attachment. And what that means is it's not a part of the 25, but it's attached. It really can focus on year one. Because once you get going with the grant, then we're going to work with you, and we're going to make sure that the plans are tight for the budget plans are tight for for all the years, including we'll go back and talk through year one. Year one is the main thing we're looking at. If you are a person who likes to go through and think through, and you have, want to think through the 3 years, you're welcome to do that. But year one is what we're really focused on with the application.
Hey, Dana,
Okay, thank you.
this is Sherry in Danville. Hey. So if I hear you correctly, that means we're only going to be turning in a budget for that percentage, right? For that first year.
Well, if you look at the budget chart in the grant within the RFA, it's going to tell you the amount of money that you're going to have each year. And so you're going to focus on the total amount that you have for year one. Now, you do need to keep in mind that in this grant, 16% of all of the money that you have is going to be spent with early, 42% is going to be spent on elementary, and the last 42% is spent on middle and high together. And you can decide how you want to balance that out. It's not always going to be 21 middle, 21 high. It's going to be based on the needs and the size of the school, but 42% total is middle and high. So when you're doing your budget, you will focus on the amount that's in the chart that you would get for year one. And remember, that depends on whether you're small, medium, and large. And if you look at the end of the RFA, there is a breakdown of whether you're considered small, medium, and large. Go back into the RFA, look at what your budget would be for year one, and plan out year one, keeping in mind 16 early. And that's birth to age 5. 16% needs to be spent with that. And your application needs to be clear on what your plan is for birth to 5. And, a lot of times, I know if you've been in circle and you're wanting to do continuation, you've already had to think about that. But if you haven't, that might be new for your district. Like, what are you going to do from birth to 5? But that truly is the goal, to engage with parents, even parents before they have school age children, and go ahead and start those conversations about how they can provide literacy rich environments at their homes for their kiddos, and the importance of talking to their kiddos and having their kiddos talk and reading to them, and what can you do within your district and your community to promote that literacy and get that messaging out to parents about all, the importance of that for their kiddos. And so that needs to be a part of your plan as well.
Okay, so just for clarification's sake, because I know there's a cutoff for questions, and I've made the mistake of emailing for a question on a different grant before and got the email back saying I couldn't.
Yes.
So we are a medium district. So in medium, it says year one is $300,000. So that $300,000 is the only thing we need to turn in a budget for.
That's right. The first year of money. Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hey, Dana, we have some questions in the chat box that
Okay.
we probably need to address before we move on.
Okay.
The first one says, it's in reference to the partner letters and blinding those.
Yes.
Is it okay that schools and partners do not put their letter on letterhead?
Absolutely. Yes.
Okay. All right, next. Would a table of contents count in the 25-page limit?
Yeah, it does. Every single thing that you put in that 25 page. And if you look at the RFA, there is a line where it talks about the components of what needs to be turned in the order. There is a list of everything that you need to have, and anything else that you put in there does count within that 25 pages. So keep that in mind.
Okay. And then the final one, I think they found the information, but just in case anyone else is curious, the question is, so in year one, do you have more funding than the other years? How is that split?
So when you, I don't have that chart in front of me, but if you look in the RFA, it clearly tells you the amount that you have each year. And for KyCL round 2, which is what you're applying for, it's 3 years of money. And so if you take a look at it, you will see the amount that you will get every single year. Now, one of the things that can happen is if you do need to make a plan for spending year 1 money in year 1 in your application. However, if you are awarded, if you still have money left over from year 1, it gets rolled into year 2. And if you still have money left over after year 2, it gets rolled into year 3. So if you're awarded, you don't have to spend every penny of year 1, but you do have to spend all of year 1 before the year 2 money kicks in, if that makes any sense. It's kind of divided that way. But you can, anyway, but you can, in the RFA, it lists it very clearly what you would be getting for each one of those 3 years. I just don't have that in front of me, and it completely depends on, yeah, and it depends on whether you're small, medium, or large.
Okay, and one more question. In the RFA, it specifically mentions a letter of interest from the district. So can you please clarify if we need a letter of interest from the district, and if so, where it goes in the order of the program components?
Yes, whoever asked this, you're probably going to get I saw this question come through the mailbox, and so you're probably going to get a response for this soon. But when you are so 2 things. One of the things that was clarified in the RFA when it was redone is the assurance document is the cover letter. That's where the superintendent is going to sign. It's going to be notarized. That's considered your assurance and your cover letter. That is clarified in the new RFA, or the updated one that, just has clarifications in red. So just to let you know, that's the same thing. So if you're looking for a separate assurances, there's not a separate. It is the cover letter. It is where the superintendent signs, and it's notarized. And so for the, what was the other part of that, Danielle?
It says, oh, hold on, it just moved up. Hold on. Clarify if we need a letter of interest from the district.
Okay,
and if so, where would it go?
Okay, so all the information about your district goes within the 25 pages. Now, you will notice that there is an attachment that's going to go in that's got signatures. So those signatures are your principal saying, we are interested. Yes, we will do what what the grant requires, and they sign it. So you do have a paper where they're going to sign that, and that's showing interest by them signing that. However, the other part of that is within the 25-page narrative, you're going to talk about your interest in the grant, why you're interested, because you're going to talk about how your kiddos are doing right now, and what needs you have for your children in your district, what needs you have for your teachers, and your commitment to this grant. So that will be discussed within the 25 pages, but that is not a separate letter that is attached anywhere. So there is, like I said, there is an attachment for signatures, and those signatures are you assuring that you have talked to those principals and they're on board with it. They sign it, their name is there, they sign it, and that is separate. But as far as an interest letter, there is no interest letter that is attached. But your interest and your commitment and your needs and how the grant can meet your needs, all of that was within the body of the 25 pages.
Okay, and then another question asks, is the public preschool considered a partner?
Yes, absolutely.
And would they need a letter from them?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And
are you talking, I've got a feeling, well, let me just clarify.
okay.
I'm assuming that's talking about a preschool that is within the school.
Yes,
And
the public preschool.
yes, and you do need to get a letter saying that the people who are working within the preschool, and typically that would come from the preschool director. Typically, counties, districts have like a preschool director that works at central office, and it would come from them saying that they are committed to this grant and they would, want to be a part of it. Yes, preschools, early childhood, even outside, they will have to get professional learning, and they will have to, some of them will have to be a part of cohort 1, cohort 2, and cohort 3. So you do need a letter, because they do need to think about how are they going to make that happen as far as the professional learning and the commitment to that. So yes, they would be considered a partner, and they do need a letter.
All right, another question in the chat. In addition to the 25-page narrative, will we also include a district literacy plan document?
You do. And that district literacy plan document, if you look at the RFA, that is the newest one, that was clarified. That was in the part where it tells the components and the order, that was actually left out of the original one. And so you'll see that in red. That was an addition. It was talked about in the RFA, but in the components, it wasn't listed. It is now. A literacy plan that covers, the needs and what you're going to plan to do about them, your literacy plan, that's an attachment. And you will find that in the updated RFA listed under the components. It'll show you exactly where to put that.
Okay. Another question is, can 21st KyCL be partners even if they are part of the schools?
So are you talking about the 21st Century Grant?
I'm assuming so. It looks like the 21st Century Grant.
So I guess my question would be, so my first thought is, I don't think that they would be a partner. It's another grant that your school has, but I don't think that they would be a partner. A partner is someone who is who typically, and I'm gonna say this in two ways. So community partners are people within the community who are partnering with you to provide literacy services and training and connect people within the community. Your early child care partners are partners that are, most of them will be outside of your school, although you can have preschool within. But they will be people that are partnering with you to put an increased emphasis on their teachers getting professional learning focused on literacy. And so I'm a little unclear about how 21st Century, how the grant would partner. You definitely, when you have multiple grants within your district, one of the things that's really important is that you figure out who's going to pay for what, and you figure out how the goals can connect, because you absolutely don't want to have different grants that are both focused on literacy and be competing. You want your focus to be the same, and then the way you spend your monies divided among the grants and really clear. But I don't really understand how they could be a partner. So if you're on here and you want to give me more specifics about how you're thinking about partnering with them, please do.
Okay, I'll go ahead and go to the next question in case, let's see if that person wants to comment. I think Debbie Kendall. Debbie, did you have any more questions with the 21st Century Grant?
Yes, I do. This is Debbie Kendall.
Okay.
The question I had was, the 21st Century Grants also have a component within those that you have to provide services for students who are identified as needing reading interventions. If they are identified for that during the school day, then you have to continue those same interventions after school in your after school 21st Century program. So that is what I was wondering if if that would be considered another partnership for this grant.
Um, I don't think the way you're describing, because like if 21st Century is giving you you're paying for after school tutoring and intervention after school that's connected to what they're doing during the school day, I don't think that would be a partner. However, I will say, if you wanted, okay, so if 21st Century is not providing professional learning, which they might, I don't know all the aspects of 21st Century, but let's just say that they are not providing professional learning to the teachers that are working with the children outside of school hours, or inside for that matter, then you could provide professional learning to those teachers through the KyCL grant. And so you could talk about that, but I don't think that they would be considered another partner with the
Okay,
grant.
well, under partners, it says, let's see, it says something about including public libraries, after school programs, mentoring programs, etc. So the 21st Century, I mean, it is part of the time, it is after school programming. And that's why I was questioning that, because it doesn't list 21st Century as partners.
Right.
But it does list after school programs. So that was my question. Could you consider 21st Century programs as after school programming partners?
So do they need professional learning, or do they get professional learning from 21st Century grant funds?
They do participate.
They do participate. They can participate in it can be within their own grant, or it can be things that your district provides extra as an in-kind expense.
If we provide, this is Jenny Lynn, I'm sorry, if we provide something, Jenny Lynn Hatter, I'm sorry. If we provide something that we think is indicative or goes along with their goals, then we'll give them first dibs at it, that kind of thing.
Yeah. So what I would say is they're not typical partners. The typical partners would be people like there could be an organization that provides that provides after school care and training and or intervention and support for kiddos. And if they need if they need professional learning, then you could partner with them so that you could pay for professional learning for them. And so the 21st Century, it's not a normal partner. And are you worried that you're not going to have enough partners and that's why you need to use them?
No, I was just thinking of it. I was just brainstorming as many ideas for partners as we could.
Yeah.
On that same note, could I chew on your sleeve like a kindergartner on that same note? And we really appreciate this. I feel like I'm that kid in the class has my hand up with 10,000 questions.
That's fine. That's why we're here.
I have listened to the stuff you said, so they're my questions after I've done my homework. The perks document. I worked for the State Department years and years and years ago, and I'm familiar with that, but probably honestly an old version. When we got started overhauling our writing program, we did an extensive SWOT of it, but I don't know as I have the perks. And I mean, I'm perfectly willing to do that. Would you suggest that? And where do I go about getting it? That might be a really stupid question, but I want to do what's right and give good data, to see what I need.
Right. So when you just go to the KDE website, in the search box, if you put perks, just PERKS, it'll lead you to that perks document.
Okay.
And you're welcome to use that. It is not required. What is required is that districts really take a close look at what's going on in their district and what needs to happen in the district, right, and what's the best use of grant funds to meet the needs, first of all, of your kiddos, and second of all, of your teachers who need training to support those kiddos.
Right.
And so if you have any type of needs assessment is fine. So if you did a SWOT and you feel like that gives you really good information, you can use that. I will say that the perks document does work you through the components of comprehensive literacy. And it might, even if you think that you have a good handle on your needs, if you look at it, it might bring up an area that you might want to just look more deeply into, ask questions about, to try to get a full picture of what's going on, you know, in your district.
Well,
and
that's
so
very helpful.
I would suggest that you look at it, but it's not like, it's not, it doesn't have to be attached to the perks document, or any other needs assessment is not submitted with your application. However, you will, in your 25 pages, refer back to your needs assessment, because that's how you decide what you need, how this grant is going to support what you need. And so, so that's my suggestion, is to look at it. But if you have something that when you look at it, you say, oh, we've already done this in a different way, that's fine too.
And we were excited that answers it, nails it right on the head, because we thought if we could get good extra data from it, we're going to use it, you know, but we just wanted to make sure we weren't headed off down a rabbit hole the wrong way. So.
Well, that's a good question, because you don't want to get your head stuck in there and not get out.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Debbie, did that get your question answered with 21st century?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay, great. All right, Dana, we've got a few more in the chat.
Okay.
This is the question. We are applying for a continuation grant. In this grant with the preschool and elementary school, we did reading project last year. We are going with a new provider this year. They will expand on the learning of guided reading from the reading project. Would we have to follow the cohort model, or could we use the chart on the continuing with professional learning? She says she's referring to page 8 chart in the RFA.
Okay, so I'm probably going to have to get a little clarification, because I'm going to repeat back what I heard. What I heard is that, and I'm assuming you didn't mean 1 year, because remember that this grant is long-term, extensive professional learning that has a very intentional focus for a long period of time to change teacher practice. Like this grant, Circle, and this grant is never a time where there's just a small bit of PD on something and then you move on to something else. It's long-term. It's support for implementation. It's coaching for good implementation. It's to really change teacher practice. But what I feel like I heard this question say is that you were using something in Circle, and now you want to change and use something else. So clarify for me, and maybe read again, Danielle. You were doing the Kentucky reading project, and now you're going to spend more of a focus on guided reading. Is that correct, Danielle? Is that what they were saying?
Well, they're going to go with Scholastic. Tanya, if you're on here, would you like to talk about this a little?
Sure. We did the reading project with the round 1 of the Circle grant for the 3 years, and all of our teachers got trained in the reading project. But what we were wanting to do for the next set of 3 years is to work with Scholastic. I know we have to do the elevating evidence form, but they could continue to take the guided reading and the components of that to a deeper level than just what we got from the reading project. What we got from the reading project was great, but we feel like that Scholastic could extend that learning. So what I'm trying to figure out is, since we're extending the learning, even though it's not the exact same vendor, which of those charts on page 8 do I need to be paying attention to for that?
So if it's I understand what you're saying. You're going to use a different provider, but you're going to focus on a strategy you've already started on, and you're going to go into it more deeply. In that case, it is fine for you to follow the continuation, like the 30-30. You're welcome to follow that because if everybody, so one of the things you can, this is like the little test for it. If everybody's already got training and guided reading that's going to do that, then it doesn't make sense to go back to a cohort model. It makes sense for everybody to still get a lot of focus PD and to go deeper. And so from what you're describing to me, it sounds like you would want to go with the continuation model, where you, because they've already had it, now they're all going to go to a deeper level, and that would be the one that's the 30-30. 24. That would be the continuation. The reason you would want to go back to a cohort model if you circle in your continuation is if once again you're starting something totally new and you want to go back to the idea that there is some research to support that when you're starting a new initiative in a school, if you have early adopters who get on board, who get really focused, excited about it, that they can get a lot of professional learning, and then you can have support from within your schools as well for the next people that come on board. And so if that's the case, that you're doing something brand new and you want to go back to that cohort model, definitely follow the one that's for the cohort for continuation. But if you're doing a strategy that you have already started, it's fine to go to the continuation model. And you, within your 25 pages, you would need to be specific about that and say, we learned through the Kentucky Writing Project, we started learning about guided reading. And this, if we're awarded, then we're going to be, diving deeper into more about guided reading. And we're going to be using a different provider for that. But the strategies that we started would be the same. And that's why we're going to use the continuation, chart with the 30-30 rather than the cohort model. You just would explain it. But that's a very good question.
Okay, I'd like to piggyback on that with our situation with our middle school and high school. We did ALM last year. Learned a lot, got everybody trained on that. And we were thinking that we could go deeper with some of those strategies and embed some more writing into it with transferring to the Kentucky Writing project. So in that case, would we also be able to use that same continuation model, or would we have to look at the cohort again?
I think that you need to look really closely at what they've learned in the past and what they're going to learn now. I feel like ALM, although correct me if I'm wrong, they would have mentioned some things, but their training is pretty different than the Kentucky Writing Project and the support given for that. I do want to let you know, though, you can so you need to think through that and talk through, think through what that would look like. And if you feel that it was fully, addressed in ALM, but this is just going deeper along the same lines, then you could do the same thing. You could follow that cohort. The one where everybody gets training. The other thing just to keep in mind if you're a continuation, there is, if you'll notice that the RFA says you can start a new cohort, you can go with that continuation grid, or you can do a hybrid. You could kind of think about both. The other thing just to keep in mind as well is that even some of the smaller districts in Circle had decided early on that instead of only having a few people each year, that they were going to give training to everybody because they wanted that focus. So the cohort model is a way that you can go. But if you feel like so for Tanya, if everybody's already gotten training in writing, then you're not going to want them to have a years where they don't get training again. And that's what the cohort model would do. So what you would want to do is make sure that you talk about a plan to have everybody keep focusing on that, because it wouldn't make sense to have that training circle and then in writing, and then if you weren't in cohort 1, you wouldn't get training at all. let's say you were in cohort 3, then you might have 2 years before you get training, and that wouldn't be best practice for them at all. And so you would just talk about the reason why everybody is going to be getting training on this each year of KyCL. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. And I like what you said about hybrid there, because there are some things that ALM might could go deeper on as we, with the vocabulary strategies and things like that, as we introduce into writing. It just seems like an appropriate next step.
Yes, I think so too. And if there's any provider at all that anyone in Circle is using, it would be really important for you to talk, if you want to continue on with anything you've done, to talk with those providers and ask them, so what do you have to provide? Now you've supported us for 3 years, but this is another 3 years. So what would it look like, and what would you be able to provide for us? Like really talking to them about, what do you provide, and how is that gonna move our teachers forward? And so really, working with them and specifically getting a plan in place for how they could even support your work would be an important thing to do.
Okay, thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Okay, another question from the chat box, Dana. If we are using a supplementary vendor like National Board Certification, what percentage of the total grant funds can be used for National Board Certification?
So that's not laid out in the grant. And so that's for you to think through yourself, except that I will tell you that you do need to use the money at the percentages. And you also need to think about your district as a whole. So this is a professional learning grant, but 100% of your teachers by year 3 have to be engaging in professional learning. And so if you only have a certain amount of money, so when you're thinking about it, so although it doesn't say you can only use a certain amount for national boards, if you had, I'm just going to make up something, but let's say you had 50 teachers in your district that wanted to do national boards, and you divided out the money, and you realize that's going to take so much money. I'm not going to have money for the rest of the teachers who also are required to get professional learning. So it wouldn't make sense to overspend if you have so you really are just going to have to figure out what makes sense. So let me go back to saying that if you'll notice in the RFA, national boards and the National Center for Families Learning and Imagination Library, they are supplemental. So you have to have somebody for early, a professional learning for early, a professional learning for elementary, professional learning for middle, professional learning for high. Once you've decided what needs you have, what professional learning provider is going to best meet those needs, and you decide how much you're going to spend on that, you will know how much is left over to spend on for national boards. And at that time, you can tease out what makes sense, because we're not going to tell you national boards is awesome and we want people to do that, and you are not limited. However, you have to provide that professional learning that is already approved, or that you get approved for every single level first. And with the money that you have left over, you can pay to add more kids to Imagination Library, do national boards, or contract with the National Center for Families Learning for your family engagement. So, and also keep in mind that in this grant, if you have someone who you're going to hire to be a grant director for your district, if they are also a coach, they're acting like a coach and supporting through coaching activities, you can pay 50% of their salary, and 50% of their time has to be spent on grant activities. If they are only directing the grant, you can only spend 30% of your grant money on their salary, but 30% of their time has to be spent on grant activities. The way to do this is to look at your full budget take out your salary for your grant director, which you really need. And I will tell you, and I think I've mentioned before, we've had districts in Circle that they've tried to use librarians, teachers, assistant principals to direct the grant, and it's been super challenging because there actually is a lot that needs to be done to support such a strong focus on professional learning and to support it in the way it needs to be supported, to make sure that focus is clear with all of your principals, with all of your teachers, and that it moves forward, and that professional learning logs are gathered, and that things are done correctly, that requests are made in appropriate ways, that information that's required is given at required times. It really does require somebody dedicated to concentrating on the grant. And so you will take your total budget, you will take off the top what it's going to cost. You're either the 30% of a salary or 50% for someone to direct your grant. With the remaining amount of money, you have to spend 16% on early, 42 on elementary, 42 on middle and high. And so you will first of all think of what professional learning providers do we need, and you will choose either someone off the list, or you'll get approval through elevating evidence packet to use somebody else. You will take the amount it costs for professional learning off of, out of your budget. Any resources that are needed to implement those strategies off your budget. And then with whatever is left over, that's the amount that you could have to spend on national boards. And so at that's the way you would kind of figure out what you can spend. Someone did ask if they could pay for teachers to retake tests, and the answer is no. If you have teachers that are wanting to do national boards and you want to pay for their modules to go through national boards, yes, you can do that with grant funds. You also can pay for the fee for them to take the test one time. However, if they do not pass their test, then any for the number of times they need to retake it, they will have to pay for it. Or if your district wants to pay for it another way, you can, but you cannot pay for them to take the test multiple times with grant funds, only once. Did that answer the question?
Yes, it did.
Okay.
Okay, the next question from the chat. As a continuation district, what data will be most pertinent for showing growth over time, since K-PREP didn't exist last year? Without last year's K-PREP, which was the data used in the original grant, there is really only 1 year's worth of data to show growth over the time of the grant, which is from the first year. We have map data from this year only, since we switched from another universal screener in previous years.
So when you are looking at data anytime ever, it is best to triangulate data. It is best never to make a determination about the needs of your kiddos and your district based on one test one day. So I highly suggest you look at everything that you have and make determinations, and that's what you will talk about in your 25 pages. For example, if you have a universal screener, that typically what universal screeners do is they identify that the kiddo might have some needs, but then you would follow up with a diagnostic to say, okay, do they have what needs, or do they really have? And then you would identify their specific needs before you place them into intervention. Then when you put them in intervention, you're going to be doing progress monitoring along the way to decide, is this intervention really working for them, or do I need to change it? So within your school, if you have a strong MTSS program, which you're required to do, you should be collecting multiple points of data on your kiddos, and you should be using that. So even if you changed universal screeners, you still should have known overall how your kiddos were doing on the one national screener or universal screener. And then you can even talk about it in your needs. You can say, we used this one and this showed certain percentage of kiddos had needs. And then this, now we're using MAP and we've only given it once, but this is what it's showing. You can actually talk about that, but you can also talk about your diagnostics that you're using, your progress monitoring, what your progress monitoring is showing. It's more important that you show a true picture of the needs of your county. And so state testing is a one test one day, and you're right, we don't even have it for 20. So if you have state testing data that you would like to talk about, you're welcome to. But in this grant, the goal is really to show what is currently happening with your kiddos and what do you need to do to support your teachers so they're more effective at teaching reading and writing, so that your kiddos can do better and be strong, be stronger at reading and stronger at writing, stronger in all the areas of comprehensive literacy. So be thinking about everything that you have, and in your 25 pages, you will discuss that and give information related to the true needs of your kiddos and how this grant can really benefit ultimately your kiddos.
Okay, and last question from the chat. Is it allowed to choose more than one professional learning provider? For example, we have a few of our teachers trained in the Kentucky Reading Project, but would like all to be trained. But we also want to train some of our teachers in the Kentucky Writing Project.
The answer is absolutely yes. You are welcome to use any of the, you can do more than one provider. You have to have at least one approved for each level. You absolutely can use more than one. And it sounds like in that case, you might be doing a hybrid model, because you'd be doing only some teachers with Kentucky Reading and adding everybody into Kentucky Writing, or some to Kentucky Writing. So yeah, you can absolutely do that. The goal is to support comprehensive literacy, reading and writing instruction for all of your teachers, and you're going to do what meets their needs. So if you have teachers, and you probably will have new teachers coming in that maybe you've done something in the past that has been great, and you want your new teachers or teachers that haven't had it to participate, you can talk about that, plus talk about what others are going to have. So yes, you absolutely can do that.
All right, Dana, that's all in the chat. Now, if there are any other questions, you can just unmute or and just speak up if you'd like to.
Hi, Dana. This is Michelle. How are you?
Hey, Michelle. Michelle Bell.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I do have a quick question for you. So with us being in Circle this year 3, of course, we've participated in the Early Childhood Literacy Academy that they've talked about. That's through GREC. But it was one of our supplemental things that we did, because we actually chose Imagination Library. Mm-hmm. So if we are awarded the KyCL grant and we start with it, if we choose, let's say, Artful Reading, which is on the list for our provider for our early childhood, or for our partners and our preschool, which we're trying out this year, and we're actually loving it, but they actually love it. Do we have to submit elevating evidence to also participate in the Early Childhood Literacy Academy through GREC, or can that just be something that it's okay that we still participate in, since we are choosing a provider that's already been approved as our main focus?
So what I hear you saying, Michelle, is you're going to choose somebody else off the list to be your approved provider, and you're asking whether you need to turn in an elevating evidence to use the training for GREC as well. Is that correct?
Yes.
So one of the things that's different in KyCL, in Circle, you did not have to fill out an elevating evidence when you wanted to have a supplemental professional learning provider or a resource. We handled it in a different way. However, in KyCL, for every professional learning provider that is not on the grid, and every resource that you choose that you want to purchase to supplement your literacy work in your county, you do have to fill an elevating evidence packet. So just because it's something that you used in Circle, it doesn't matter. If it's with this grant, if you choose someone who is listed in the RFA, you do not have to fill out an elevating evidence packet. However, if you want to use anybody else for any other reason, even if it's supplemental, you do have to fill out the elevating evidence packet. That is also the same with any resource that you decide to use. And I tell you, the reason that was added is because it is super important that you spend time looking at research on anything that you want to purchase to make sure that it meets the needs of your kiddos in your area, but then also to make sure that there is a strong evidence base on what you want to implement. I'm sure that all of you have been flooded with vendor information. It got really big during even last spring, even more. From vendors all over the United States trying to let you know about what they have to offer that you can purchase. And upon first glance, sometimes they look really good. But every now and then, when you really start looking at it, there is no evidence. If you get on What Works Clearinghouse, there's no evidence that the strategies they promote make a difference in students. And so it's really important that you look at multiple research studies about what you want to do, regardless of if it's a resource or if it's a professional learning provider. So in KyCL, if it is not on the approved grid, everything, both now when you're submitting and through the life of the grant, when you want to do something outside of what's already approved in that RFA, you will be asked to fill out the forms, looking at multiple research to make sure that you are spending your money as wisely as you can, purchasing things that really have evidence to support that they make a change in teacher practice and in student outcomes.
Dana, here's an interesting question that follows right with that from the chat. It says, once all the elevating evidence packets are complete and approved, will we receive a master list of approved in the state?
So the answer is no, you will not. And the reason you will not is because you need to spend time looking at the research yourself and thinking about how it connects to your population of students and your needs as students. So the goal of the elevating evidence is to guide you through looking at research on strategies that providers give you, or resources that you want to purchase. And so the answer is no. There will never be a list that says this county used Orton Gillingham, and so now you can use it if you want. You have to take the time to look at the professional learning providers and the resources yourself to make sure that the research supports your literacy plan. It follows in line with your literacy plan and the goals of the grant, which are to increase teachers' ability to teach comprehensive literacy, and that it meets the needs of your children. Sometimes you might look at research and realize that the people who did the research did research on kiddos that are not like your kiddos. And so the answer is no. There will never be a list. If there's something you are interested in, then you have to fill out the elevating evidence packet, and you have to look at research to assure that that you've the goal is to really take the time to choose providers, professional learning providers, and resources that match the needs of your kiddos and your teachers. And it's going to be different in every district. And it's like I said, your literacy plan is going to be different in every district. It's got to align with your literacy plan. So no, there will never be a list of okay things. You'll always have to do the research and make sure that it's a good fit for your district.
And Dana, here are two more questions that go right along with the elevating evidence. The first one is, would you give an example of a resource purchase that would require an elevating evidence? And also, do you have to do elevating evidence on supplemental texts that are bought as resources?
Okay, so if you're buying books, the answer is no. You do have to send an email. And once you're right now, anything that you're thinking of has to go to the KDE RFA mailbox if you want feedback on it right now. and or you would not have evidence, but you do have to get approval for things that you purchase through the grant. So you right now, if you feel like you need to do it before you submit, it would go to the KDE RFA mailbox. However, once you're awarded, your email would go to Danielle and I, and we would look at the resource, the books that you want to purchase, and we would give you approval. But you do not have to do elevating evidence on books that you purchase for students to use, or books that you purchase for book studies for teachers. You do have to get approval for titles of book studies for teachers, because the book titles, although we do definitely want you to do book studies, that's a great thing to do. Your book studies, whatever book you choose, has to focus on improving your teacher's ability to teach reading and writing, and to address components of comprehensive literacy. And so the titles have to be approved, but you do not have to do elevating evidence for books that you purchase, but you do have to get them pre-approved. As far as a resource that you would need to do research on, we have some, we do want you to have a strong intervention program. And let's say that you wanted, I'm just going to think of something. Let's say that you needed materials for intervention, and you wanted to do, let's say LLI. I'm trying to think of something. Let's say you want to do use LLI and purchase that for your intervention. That would be a resource that you would need to do. You would need to go to our What Works Clearinghouse, and you would need to look at the information, the research that you have that's been done on LLI, and you would need to complete a packet for that. Another one would be Rise Up, if that's another intervention program. Or then you would, same thing, you would need to get research, and you would need to research it to make sure that it's an effective program and meets the needs of your kiddos. Does that answer that question? Feel free to ask me to expand on that if you want more.
Yes. Yes,
Okay.
I answered it.
Anna, this is Sherry and Danville. I have a connected question a little bit on the books.
Yes.
So since you're saying the titles have to be approved, when we
Yes.
do our budget and our plan, would you advise us to include what we expect to use in that, or would you just want us to be vague in that and then have those approved after we were awarded?
So the answer is, you're welcome to say exactly what you want to use. That's perfectly fine. What's going to happen is, as soon as you're awarded, Danielle and I are going to meet with you, and we're going to go through your plan and your budget, and we're going to make sure that everything that you want to do is tied to the focus of the grant. The people that are scoring the grant, they give you scores based on have you included everything? Have you, Audrey, I think you need to mute I think you need to mute, yeah. So when you go to, I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. Danielle, what was I saying? Sherry, ask me again. I'm so sorry.
You were talking about whether or not to be specific about the books in the application, or wait until after.
Thank you for getting me back on track. Okay, so in the application, go ahead and say what you want to say. And you can either say, and it probably would be best for you to be specific about what you're thinking. I'm keeping in mind that it's got to be focused on reading and writing instruction, and making your teachers stronger with that. Keep that in mind. But when your RFA is scored, people who are scoring it are outside of KED that have been hired and trained in what the grant is looking for, and they give you a score. However, they don't always I will just say, just because you're awarded the grant does not mean that everything you put in your application is A-OK and good to go and awarded. Danielle and I will meet with everybody that's awarded. We'll go through every bit of your budget. We'll talk through it, make sure it fits the focus of the grant, make sure that it meets the needs you've talked about, and we will work with you on that plan. So my point is, if you put something in your RFA and later we realize that, oh, that doesn't meet the needs of the grant, it'll be perfectly fine for you to change your plan and your budget once you're awarded, because just because you're awarded doesn't mean that's saying, yes, go forth with everything. It's saying that you got the top score, and so you get the money, and now we're going to work with you on the aspects of your money, like, is your budget in line and that kind of thing. Does that make sense?
Yes, I have a couple of other questions, if that's okay.
Yeah.
I'm having a minor panic attack over here about these elevating evidence forms because they're due the day after tomorrow. That's only if you're going with a different vendor, correct? Than what's on the list.
Yes, if you go with a professional learning provider that is not listed in the RFA, you need to get approval through the elevating evidence packet.
Right.
Or so if you reference a resource that you want to use, yes.
But like underneath that, so say we went with one of the vendors for our professional learning that's on the list and we didn't submit an elevating evidence, everything else that you put in your application and in your budget, not everything has to be on an elevating evidence form, right? It's just your professional learning vendor, correct?
That's correct for the application. That is correct for the application. It is only for your professional learning providers. However, as the grant goes forward, KyCL does require elevating evidence for resources as well.
But those don't have to be in the day after tomorrow.
That's right.
Okay, so that's just once we're awarded, those things will come as those things come about.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Yes, that's exactly right. And you can talk about you can go ahead and even talk about the resources you're considering in your application. That's perfectly fine too.
Okay, one last question, and then I'll let somebody else go.
Yeah.
Are there any exemplary examples out there of applications?
No.
Okay.
There are not.
I felt like that was mentioned at one point, but I might have dreamed it.
No, there's not. But if you come to the training that we're going to do on the 18th and 19th, we're going to just walk very slowly through each piece that you need and kind of talk about it and give you pointers on what needs to be in that, included. And so that may answer more questions, but no, we are not going to and have not provided an example.
Dana, for elevating evidence, do they have to turn in an EE document on an RTI program before they write the grant, or can they do that after the award?
It can be done after. The elevating evidence that's going to be due on November 6th is going to be if a district chooses to use a different professional learning provider than the ones listed in the RFA. All other elevating evidence packets related to resources would be something that you would do after you're awarded.
Okay, as of right now, that was the last question in the chat.
Does anybody else have a question they would like to ask?
I have one more, Miss Dana.
Sure.
Since we are continuation, and you may have already answered this question previously, can we continue with our current district literacy plan and our school plans that we've been working on, or is that something new that we will have to create?
No, if you're continuation, then it completely makes sense for you to continue with the plan that you have started. If you're in Circle, from the beginning, if you had a plan, you can tweak it at any time. You're welcome to change and tweak at any time, but you never had to go back and restart from scratch, because it would be the same. I mean, you should have a goal and you should be working along those lines, and your plan should be getting you to your goal. And so you absolutely can use what you used in Circle, but you will talk about that. So when you're in your 25-page narrative, you will just say, we've attached a literacy plan. It's one that we created in 2018. And we are, although we've tweaked it to meet whatever needs, we want to continue to try, meeting the goal through our plan. And so you can talk about it, but you can. But when you upload your literacy plan, if it's one that you created through Circle and have been using, that's perfectly fine.
Okay, good. I thought that was right. And it does make sense because that's what we're going to do, but I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah. Thank you for asking, Michelle. Hey,
Thank
Katie.
you.
You're
Can
welcome.
I ask a clarifying question, please?
Sure.
I just want to make sure that I'm clear on the elevating evidence forms that are due on Friday. I want to make sure I'm understanding what you're saying. The ones that we are submitting by Friday are for our primary providers.
That's
for
right.
each level.
Yes.
So if later, let's just say Fontes and Pinnell Heinemann, that is not our primary provider, but if we wanted to do some professional learning or we wanted some resources, we could then provide the elevating evidence form at that time after we've submitted the grant.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I was having a little heart attack here. Thank you.
I'm sorry. I'm glad you didn't leave before it was settled. Anybody else have anything they want to ask today? Well, the good news is that we're going to be answering questions tomorrow too. So tomorrow, it's going to start at 10 o'clock and you will use the link in the RFA. And here's somebody talking. I hear somebody, but I don't know who I hear. Anyway, you're going to, tomorrow we're going to answer questions between 10 and 11. And so if you are thinking through this and you've got more questions that you would like to answer, then feel free to hop on tomorrow between 10 and 11. Now, I will tell you that tomorrow is the last time that we're going to be doing a question and answer. And then we are typing up every one of these questions and answers and putting it on a document. We are also typing up every question that's been asked through the KDE RFA website. And that document will be posted on the KDE competitive sites webpage, like right underneath this grant, this RFA, grant application. You'll see that. And then you'll be able to read through to see questions that other people have. But if you have anything that you're start thinking of later and want to ask tomorrow, feel free to get on because we will answer questions again tomorrow between 10 and 11. So I hope that we've given you some really good information, and we want to be, we want to help you as much as we can in writing this grant. And so we have the one more day tomorrow for question and answers. And then we'll also be providing technical assistance on November 18th and November 19th. And that is basically doing a training where we walk through what you would need to submit, what we walk through the RFA and what you need to submit. So thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. You all have asked really good questions. So thank you for all the questions that you've asked. And I hope you have a great rest of the day. And please join us tomorrow if you'd like to. Thanks so much. Good luck in your writing of your grant.